Are audio companies ripping us off? Well, today I'm going to be reacting to a video by a content creator named Will Hatton. He's going to go over his perspective on what's going on out here in the music game thus far. We have all types of new plugins coming up essentially every week. So let's see what's going on. Are they ripping us off or are they giving us good quality products? Let's check it out.
Listen, companies are capitalizing on your laziness and gaps in your knowledge, but I want to make sure that I save you money and equip you with the tools to know what to look for. Let's dive into it. Almost every month we see the same kinds of plugins released again and again. A lo-fi plugin here, a tape emulator there, your favorite producer drops a vinyl effects device. These are all variations of the same theme. A fluctuating pitch, high frequency roll-offs, and a sprinkle of analog warmth. You might ask, what about the tools that actually enhance my music? Well, once again, we're often seeing a multi-band compressor, an EQ, a saturator, just wearing a shiny new UI that is going to cost you CPU power. Even so-called multi-effects tools just automate a couple of filter delays and a flanger under names like Distance Reactor or Skibbity Source Maker. If you're watching this, chances are you already own Ableton Suite or FL Studio, Logic Pro, or another DAW which you've paid hundreds of dollars for, all of which can recreate the tools you're being sold over and over again.
That's a great point. Sometimes I do see plugins that seem like they're just kind of remixing or putting a new face on an older product and just repackaging it and reselling it to us. I can say that in the process of actually recording artists as opposed to just cooking up beats, sometimes those newer GUIs with just one simple button that kind of changes a whole lot at once, or a knob as opposed to 3 or 4 sliders, can be much more convenient, especially if they actually don't take up too many resources on your computer. So we do have quite a few different tools that essentially do the same thing, but if the GUI is an improvement in workflow, I say it's definitely, worth it, at least in my opinion, to go for. But if you are just cooking up beats, do you really need that many different saturators, especially if they all sound the same, especially for an extra $50 or $80 or $90? So it seems like these plugins can be pretty lucrative for the plugin makers. And if you're an FL Studio user, I actually created free patcher plugins. I have one for bass, I have one for clipping, and they're all free. So go to DesmondASounds.com, get those free plugins and cook up beats. I could charge you for them, but I didn't. So use them, enjoy them, and tell a friend.
Recently, I saw an ad for Fusion by Prototype Audio. It's a multi-band saturation device. I haven't used it for transparency, but from the trailer, we get a few snapshots, a bunch of buzzwords, and then a tagline, combine them all. We can see from the final screenshot that it is a multi-band tool with highs, mids, and lows based on the visible band splits. You've got gain here, drive, and tone. Usually speaking, gain is our volume, drive is the input level into the saturation algorithm, and tone is usually an EQ tilt or shelf. You can see here that there are 4 light indicators at the top, likely representing 4 saturation algorithms. I'm going to assume that this is maybe tube, tape, and perhaps a couple of analog desk algorithms, which is cool, but based on what information? If there's no evidence to back up what type of tube or what type of analog console it's replicating, then it's no different to a preset. If we compare this to something like an emulation, we can use UAD's collaboration with Neve, for example. We're replicating the modulative curves and harmonic saturation algorithms delivered by actual hardware. It's a reputable company that can't afford to downsell their reputation in a digital age. So going back to Fusion by Prototype, is this something that we can replicate? Let's look at Ableton's Raw, for instance. And yes, Raw leans more on distortion than saturation, but bear with me, Ableton already has a multi-band dynamic device, or compressor. Combine that in an effect rack with some saturators, and boom, you've got multi-band saturation. I'm looking at Raw's 12.2 update, which is coming soon. We've got multi-band routing as per, lows, mids, and highs seen at the top. If we want to, we can match Fusion's crossover points, say 400 Hz for the low and 1500 Hz for the high. We can adjust drive and tone and even tweak tone coloration pre and post shaper, so there's an added bonus here already. We also have modulation here, compression, and feedback, plus more, especially in delay algorithms, which is new in 12.2.
And this is something that I noticed, especially when working on those FL Studio Patcher plugins, is that a lot of these companies are kind of overhyping what certain things do, especially using buzzwords and keywords to kind of just get us all excited and all into whatever they're trying to sell us. When essentially a lot of what we have stock here in our DAWs like FL Studio or Ableton, it's going to do a lot of the same things. You just kind of have to do a little bit of work to get to that point. So as opposed to maybe just using one knob or one, plugin with a pretty GUI, you might have to use like 2 or 3 in FL Studio to get to the same point. But if you know what you're doing, you can essentially get to the same point. But then again, you have to ask the question, is the price that this plugin company trying to charge me, does that equal the value that I'm actually getting? Or am I just getting overhyped, excited, emotional on something that I can essentially do for free right in my DAW? And honestly, guys, I got to confess, man, just spend a little bit more time with those plugins in your DAW, those stock plugins, and you can get some really, really cool sounds out of it, man. I've been blown away by some of the sounds I've been able to get just right out of FL Studio.
I discovered that you can even sidechain Raw to individual percussive hits in something like a drum rack, and now we're creating tonal rhythms. Shout out Ned Rush's channel for showing me that tip. This makes Raw more than a saturation device. It's a modular sound design powerhouse. You can map modulation to nearly every parameter, apply per band distortion types, reshape signal flows like a Eurorack module, all with minimal CPU because it's built into Ableton. Again, this isn't about knocking Fusion, it's about asking, do I need to spend money on this, or do I already own something that is as capable? It's kind of the inverse reason of why I built the Lo-Fi device. I couldn't afford the SP404 at the time, so I made my own version for the DAW. Years later, the lovely community gifted me the Mark II. So now I want to build an updated version with the Mark II's effects in the DAW for anybody that doesn't have the device. You can grab the Lo-Fi and any other device I mentioned in this video over at the Patreon.
Now that's interesting. He's essentially selling the Patcher plugins that I have for free. So, especially that my FL Super Clipper, that one was really, really tough for me to let out for free, man. It sounds so good. Ridiculously good. I would say, in my opinion, is superior to the stock soft clipper. And of course, you can get it for free at Desmond8Sounds.com. But yeah, like he was saying, you listen to these different plugins and you ask yourself, could this be made in stock? Do we really need to spend that extra $50, $70, or $100 just to get essentially the same sound out of the plugin? And more often than not, man, if we just spend a little more time there with the stock plugins, just experimenting, just looking at the manual, seeing what each knob does, we can essentially pull out a lot of cool tones. With the FL D bass that I have, which is essentially somewhat similar to Waves R bass, but it also includes a distortion, so you can kind of balance the low end sub with the buzzy distortion saturated sound that's heard in modern hip hop, R&B, and pop music. That was, of course, had some inspiration allegedly from Waves R bass, and then it was created to help out the community as opposed to making the thousands upon thousands, if not millions, that Waves has likely made from their plugins. So we do have to start to ask these questions fundamentally if the price is really worth it as, producers and beat makers.
Take Portal by Output, for instance. It does complex, real time, granular reversing and pitch shifting. It's way more efficient just to use the plugin than build a monster macro rack, and I have tried a few times. So here's the 4-point test I use before buying a new VST. Do I already have this in my DAW? A lo-fi device won't fix a boring chord progression. That comes from composition, not effects. Can I afford it, and will I use it over time? Some tools are affordable via rent-to-own schemes. When I first started mixing, I used Splice's rent-to-own scheme with Isotope's Nectar 1 or 2. And the first session I got paid for covered the cost of the plugin, and then I kept using it in future sessions. And it also helped me learn to mix vocals because you can see the plugin chain and it's using helpful language. That's a perfect segue for point number 3, which is, does it enhance or hinder my understanding of production? Many new plugins use flashy branding to hide basic terms. Compression, delay, saturation, filters. These are universal audio concepts for a reason. Using this universal language, I can walk into any audio space and converse with the professionals there so that we can all drive towards the same goal. If a tool clouds your understanding instead of expanding it, I don't use it. It's out.
I understand that point to a degree. It's essential for producers and engineers out there to have a comprehensive understanding of what they're doing, what these plugins are doing, how it's affecting the audio signal, and how exactly they're going to use it in their workflow. But along with that, with the manual that comes with these, different plugins that have these cool and funny names, in the manual, they do say, hey, this is the compression for that. This, wowzer knob, or this, super crazy knob is actually a, multi-chorus into a phaser into a distortion. That's what this is. So I will say that the plugin companies do tend to have that information inside the manual, but it's really up to the producer or engineers to actually read the manual, understand what it means, and then, kind of take it from there. So if they do decide that they want to learn more about engineering, they can take those phrases from the manual, do some research, look it up, get some books, and, really go from there. But personally, in my opinion, I don't really put the burden too much on the audio companies. I would say that's up to the producer and engineer to do their research so they can have background and context on exactly what's going on.
If it's not too troublesome to build it, I would say, what would I learn by building this myself? Would it improve my workflow or inspire more creativity? What are its limitations? If your answer, like mine with Portal, is would this take way too long to replicate even one preset, and that plugin saves you serious time, then it might be worth the investment. I hope that this video saved at least one of you from wasting money.
I would say that's a really good criteria that he came up with, because one thing that comes into question for me is like the CPU usage of the plugin. So for instance, if you're cooking up and you're just chilling at home and your plugin is getting kind of CPU heavy, and you can't quite play your keys and stuff like that, and you're like, you got to turn it off, or maybe you have to print or bounce the audio with the effect on it and then turn it off so you can open up more resources in your DAW. That's one thing. But if I have a plugin that I really like the sound of it and it's like a cool effect, and I'm in the middle of a recording session working with an artist or a songwriter, the difference could be the fact of, how much CPU is it taking up. If it's helping me get to my goal quicker and the word is not really, technically sound, let's just say instead of chorus, it's, wet ocean wave effect, and it's actually just like a chorus going to a phaser, going into a delay, is that worth the investment? That's a question that I would have to ask myself personally. And once again, I say a good way to kind of stay grounded is that criteria that he laid out here in this video. So, I really like this video. It was really balanced. It didn't seem like he was really trying to steer us one way or the other. Just having us, question, second guess, and, kind of level set ourselves before we get so excited when we see our favorite producer or favorite engineer pushing a product. Just because we like them doesn't necessarily mean that the product itself is really valuable for us in the long run. So, it's great that plugin companies are making all these cool tools, especially if they're more accessible to everyone. Like back in the days, everything was more so hardware and only a handful of people could really afford it. But now these days, the companies are coming out with more things. But in the process, we want to make sure we're not just buying kid stuff or like candy essentially, as opposed to real tools that's going to help us in our creative process. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Are these audio companies taking advantage of us? Do we need a second guess? Do we need to think a bit harder and longer before we actually purchase these plugins? For those of you who actually purchase, and you need to be purchasing, where exactly do you stand on that? I want to know your thoughts in the comments. Please let me know what you think about this. So hope you enjoyed this video. My name is Desmond A, and I'll see you next time. Peace.
Desmond A.